Hello everyone, how are you doing today? James here once again with another episode of Bible Break, where we nourish our souls with God's Word. Thanks for tuning in once again. It's my hope and my prayer that these little videos over the last couple of weeks have inspired you, have encouraged you to get into God's Word, not just to read it, but to think critically about it, to really wrestle with it, to let it challenge you, to let God's truth mold your life, because it's in that wrestling, it's in that searching the scriptures and wrestling with it, that we grow, that we learn, and that we are transformed more and more into the image of Christ. So that's my prayer, that these little videos, these little teaching things would spark conversation. That it would spark conversation with your friends, with your family, at the dinner table, that we talk about the things of God with those around us. And so with that prayer, with that heart, with that sentiment in mind, let's turn to our passage for today. Today we're looking at Matthew chapter 16, starting at verse 24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me will find it. What good will it be to a man if he gains the whole world and yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul?" You know, for those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, those words can be a hard pill to swallow. You know, the way of Jesus often can feel backwards or upside down to the way that we think, to the way we order our priorities, to the way that our culture, the world around us, has conditioned us to think. The way of Jesus can often feel backwards and upside down in comparison to it. What does Jesus mean when he says, whoever wants to save his life will lose it? You know, a lot of how most of us spend our time is to try and preserve, to save, to keep our lives, to make our lives easier, to hold on to them. You know, we go and we get food in order to nourish our bodies. We cook that food so that we don't get food poisoning. We buy insurance and put insurance on our stuff, and we put insurance on ourselves even. When we get into a car, we put on a seatbelt, or, you know, depending on who's driving, maybe even a helmet, right? We spend a lot of our time trying to keep our lives. It's a basic human instinct to try and preserve our lives. So why would Jesus say that whoever wants to save his life would lose it? Well, the word that Jesus is using here for life is the same word in the original Greek that he uses here for soul. It's the same Greek word translated two different ways in English, life and soul. So what Jesus is talking about here isn't a reckless attitude. It's not a disregard for human life. What he's talking about here is surrender. It's life in a different sense. It's surrendering my life, surrendering my soul, surrendering all that I am to him, surrendering to Jesus, giving it all to him. You know, surrendering my mind, my heart, my soul, my innermost being, my innermost desires, letting God give me the desires of my heart, letting God renew my mind to think the way that Christ thinks, to be transformed more and more into his image. It's about surrendering our priorities. It's about surrendering what's important to us, and not necessarily giving it all up, although sometimes we are required to, but not necessarily giving it all up, not giving up all these different facets of our life, but surrendering them, giving them to God, letting God use them for his honor and glory, and not for our own entertainment, for our own pleasure, for our own fleshly desires, for our own fleshly priorities, but surrendering our priorities to God. surrendering our lives to God. So let me ask you, what is the most important thing to you? What's the most important thing in your life? You know, we've all been given an allotted amount of time. How are you spending yours? It's like Garnet asked us the other week in his greeting to the service, you know, what do we spend? We have a lot of time now. What do we spend our time doing? Are we spending it on the right things? Have we made Jesus the priority of our lives? And if not, what have we made the priority of our lives? Are we willing to heed his call here, to listen to his call here, to follow him fully, to take up our cross daily and pursue after him? Or are you afraid to take up that cross because of what that might mean for the rest of your life? Are you afraid of the repercussions of that? Or maybe, friends, maybe there's something that's already in your hands. There's something already that's in your life that won't allow you to pick up that cross, to bear it. What is that? What is it in your life and in my life that is holding us back from following Jesus fully, from living out his great commission, from living out his way of life? What's keeping us from following him fully? That's an important question for each of us, myself included, to ask ourselves, to say, God, what is it in my life that's holding me back from following you? Whatever it is, friends, it will not fill in the same way that Jesus does. It can't fill that hole inside the same way that he can. Whether it's possessions, your job, your status, what other people think of you, whether it's your Netflix, whether it's the bottle, whether it's drugs, whether it's relationships, whatever it is, Jesus is more important. Whatever it is, Jesus gives life fuller. He gives life abundantly. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. You know, it only makes sense to surrender all that we are to Jesus, to surrender our priorities to him, because my life, my soul, all that I am is ultimately his anyway. Our lives, friends, were never our own. You know, it's as John Foreman puts it in Where I Belong. This skin and bones is a rental, and none of us makes it out alive. My life is not my own. Your life is not your own. All that we have is not our own. It's ultimately God's. And Jesus came to give life and give life abundantly. And all he asks of us is that we surrender all that we have, which really isn't ours, is that we surrender all that we have, all that we are to him, that we give him priority, that we take up the cross and follow after him, whatever that looks like, whatever hardships, whatever struggle, whatever pain that brings. The joy, the peace, the love, and the life that he gives far outweighs the cost. So I want to encourage you to surrender your life to Jesus today. Whether you've been following him for years and you just feel like you haven't been following fully, or whether this is the first time that you're hearing about the way of Jesus and the life that he gives, and you don't want to be the same. Either way, I want to encourage you to surrender to him today, to ask him to reveal the things in your life that need to be surrendered to him, to reveal the things in your life that he wants to use for his honor and his glory, and to advance the good news of the gospel. Let me encourage you to ponder that today, to wrestle with that, to think about that. And until next time, my friends, God bless you as you continue to surrender to him. See you on Thursday.